Let's go then. Okay, guys. Hello all. I hope you're hearing me. Let me turn on my camera. So I hope you all hearing me. If not, please check your settings on Hangouts or leave a comment in the comment section on the right side of your screen. First of all, thank you very much for all the attendees that are here. We have now 60 people. We are expecting around 100 people. As you can see in your screen, we decided this is our first remote event. Usually we do it locally on site. And due to the coronavirus pandemic, we had we decided to do one of these events remotely, fully remote. And this is the first one, so we are not yet sure how this will go. But this will be for sure first a good experience, and if something goes wrong, we will make a few adjustments on the next events. So in order to have a smooth and very easy event without much disturbance, we will have some guidelines of behavior, okay? And it's the ones that you have in your screen. So first of all, we will ask you to turn off your cameras to improve the quality of the stream, and also to turn off your microphone in order to avoid unnecessary noises, background noises during the presentation. However, you are able to talk and make questions and discuss with the speaker in the questions moment, okay? So if you have a question during the presentation, we will kindly ask you to post the question in the comment section on the top right side of your screen. You have a comment section, so please comment there your question, starting the comment with question, okay? And by the end of each talk, we will answer to your questions. If you still have some doubts during the answer, you are able to turn on your mic and discuss directly with the speaker. By that time, I think there won't be any chaos between the attendees. So let's hope everything will go well. I'm making this presentation in English. Usually we do in Portuguese, sometimes in English. We noticed there was a lot of international attendees, especially from Spain, Switzerland. So we decided to make this presentation in English from start, and our speakers are prepared for it as well. So giving just a first introduction to our community, and since we have a lot of people, a lot of new people here, and people that for sure it's the first time they are getting to know us. So what is Porto.Vue? Porto.Vue is a community that was created in December of last year. And it was an effort to create a community around people who love or have an interest working with Vue. We've started with a few members. At this moment, we have 300 members. We reached that number today. So it's a huge milestone for us. So thank you all for joining this community and sharing the knowledge and your experience with us. The main purpose of this community, of course, is to share knowledge, challenges, and experience, and have a broader channel of communication between all people that work with Vue. Meetups usually happen every month in different hosts, locations, and with different speakers. Last month was an exception due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which unfortunately canceled our last event that was supposed to be at Pixel Matters with the same speakers as today. So we had to postpone that event, and we decided to move it remotely. Probably the next events will occur remotely as well, until we have sure, with certainty, that we are safe to join everybody again in an office or in a space in safety. Okay. Still, even though we are not doing on-site events, we are still looking for speakers for these full remote events. So if you have any experience with Vue, if you want to share something with the community, please talk with us. Don't be afraid. We have some suggestions of topics that you can talk. We have some materials to support you. So we are more than welcome to have someone from you, Portuguese or not, doesn't really matter. We would just want to be a bridge between knowledge, your knowledge, and other people. So to get in contact with us, please, you have several channels: the Meetup channel, Twitter, Slack, and email. So for today, as I said in the beginning, it's the 4th event, but the first one remote. We will have Tadeu, Marques, front-end developer, talking about Nuxt.JS, and Miguel Teixeira from Pixel Matters talking about Vue.js performance improvements. And that's pretty much it. Okay. Thank you very much for your presence. I want just to give you one last note, which is we would like to take a picture with all of you guys, not at the beginning, but actually in the end of the event. So in the end of the event, I would like you to, all of you, turn on the cameras, and then we can take a collective picture with some comic face or something interesting, just to make screenshots and record this moment for the time being. Okay. So thank you very much. We will start with Tadeu. Tadeu, are you ready?
Yep.
Yeah. So
can I turn everything on?
Please share your screen then.
The camera here and share my screen. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So can you also see me? Okay. Let's pretend not then. So first and foremost, thank you for the invitation for the presentation. It's just to give a context to it. It was on the last meetup that it was presented me a challenge to do a presentation on Nuxt, which was something that I wanted to study. So I studied for this presentation, and that's how I'm presenting to you right now. So according to what Fabi said, like if you want to present something, please accept challenges and use it as a form of study for also to improve the community. So with no further ado, let's start. So basically what we're talking about today is Nuxt. It works using Vue, which makes it simple because we're actually a Vue community. So hopefully everyone will understand it pretty easily. So what we'll cover in the presentation. Basically, what is Nuxt? How is it structured, which is one of the good aspects about Vue, and what can we actually build with it? So before we start, there's one thing that is really important, which is understanding what is server-side rendering. So there's a client, which has the browser we're using, and there's the server, which is providing the content to the browser. The request, usually the client makes a request to the server, which replies with an index.html to the user. Usually on an SPA development, which is what Vue does, this index.html brings very little code. It runs the Vue app, which is the starter for Vue, and there it will load every JavaScript and everything that's needed for the proper content to be rendered. So if you look into the page source of the of the browser when the page is loaded, the page source has very little information about HTML. So this can bring a problem, but this can also be done by rendering through the server, which means render in the server all the HTML, then send to the client, to the browser, and then you have access to all the information with the proper HTML tags. This is especially helpful for SEO, for search engine optimization techniques, because in the former option, there's the Google doesn't wait for every JavaScript to load and act upon the code. It will just look into basically an almost empty file that will later be replaced. If you render it on the server, when the Google goes to the page, it can already see every post, everything that's supposed to be seen, and then take its proper judgment. So server-side rendering, it's friendly for SEO. So what is Nuxt? So according to Nuxt itself, to the documentation, Nuxt is a framework designed to give you a strong architecture, and I emphasize architecture because it's one of its strong points, following official Vue guidelines. And Nuxt is the backbone of your Vue.js project, giving structure, again, to build your project with confidence while being flexible. And flexibility is something that, across the study that I've done, it's actually something that they emphasize very well. And we were talking about server-side rendering, and we will keep talking about it. It makes it like super simple. But if you have used Vue.js, you might be thinking, okay, but we can do that in Vue.js. Yes, you can. And there's this documentation represents what you have to do to build the server-side rendering on Vue.js, which is, as you can see, complicated. I wish you good luck learning all that. I wish you good luck, because when you compare it to Nuxt, this is all you have to do. It's one command, which is npx create Nuxt app, and it functions a little bit similar to what Vue CLI is. So it gives you a certain amount of options, and you can select your preferences, and it builds out of the box a project ready with server-side rendering, ready with Axios, ready with testing, with server-side framework like Express, for example. So out of the box, npx Nuxt solves this problem of server-side rendering in a quite easy fashion. So some of the features that it includes. So it includes Vue 2, it includes Vue Router that we basically all use. It includes Vuex that we basically all use as well. Server render, these two are optional. It includes Vue Meta. We will not be addressing Vue Meta, but basically, just to give a slight context, Nuxt doesn't have a file which is index.html. It generates this file. So in a file called Nuxt config options, where you set the configuration options for Nuxt, you can add, like, it's pretty easy to add an object with the metadata. It's super light. It's only like 6 kilobytes with the Vuex. It has code splitting, which is quite interesting because it separates JavaScript from the HTML. So you can actually be showing information to the client while JavaScript is loading, and that makes the user experience better because it's faster. And it uses Webpack and Vue Loader under the hood. So about Nuxt, a general introduction, that's it. So let's go into one of its main parts. How is it structured? So in red, we have the basic components that we're going to talk about. Some of them we'll address in the next slide. Some of them I'll talk here. So we have assets, which is where we place images and styles. And assets is basically these images and styles are run by Webpack after. Then we have components, which are basically components. Then we have layouts, which I'll address after. Pages we'll address after. And we have plugins. Plugins are basically the external libraries that we want to incorporate in our project, like internationalization, for example. And I'm talking too fast because the presentation is a bit long. But it's pretty easy to implement. It's really, really easy. Then we have static, which is where you place images and styles that you don't want to be run through Webpack. So it will just be served immediately to the server. Then we have the store for Vuex, which is already ready for development. And we have testing, which is everything is ready for development as well. And you can just place your tests. So let's go and dig deep further into layouts. So layouts in Nuxt, it's basically the core structure of your web page. For example, let's imagine we have a navigation drawer on the left side, and we have a nav bar on the on the up side, let's call it. So these two, if they are being used across the platform, they could be like general sculpture of the website. So this is where layouts came in. And there's three types of layouts. There's the default, the custom, and the error. The default is you don't have to do anything. It's just what's loaded when you start, and it's basically probably the structure that you will be using the most throughout the application. And then you have custom. What custom has? Let's imagine a blog, for example. A blog can have a default layout, which is the layout that is shown to the users, and in its admin section, it can have a different layout. So you can set both, and then when you afterwards, when we go into the pages, which will render specific components as well, we can decide which layout to use. And then we have error. Error is pretty interesting because you don't have to do anything for the error to work. You just have to build like the error page, and then Nuxt as a built-in strategy that will basically understand when an error is occurring, and it will redirect you directly to the error page. So you don't have to do anything, you just have to build the error page. And now you do that. Okay, before that, this is how you, in a page, how you define which layout you're using. So in this example, we have a component that we're saying that's using the admin layout, so it's a custom layout. If it said nothing, it would be the default one. So, and this is the pages now. Pages are the content, the first content that goes inside of the base structure. So they go inside of the layouts. And what pages do? This is I called it like the gold mine, because in Vue.js, for everyone who's developed, who knows, and for everyone who doesn't, there's a routing file that we use, router.js, which specifies every path that we have in every link that we have in the website. In Nuxt, we don't have such. We have a structured platform, a structured code, which starts with pages. Pages will represent your default base URL, and it is rendered by the last indexed file in this example. So the last indexed file, it's the base page, the base URL, and then after that, let's for example imagine about. The about section inside it has for sure an index.vue. So in this case, Nuxt already knows that if there's pages and the subfolder of pages is about, then the URL will be base URL - about, and it will render the index.vue. So it's pretty simple, I believe, up until now. I hope I'm not talking too fast. I know I am a bit, but I hope you are following me. So now a little bit slower. You might think about the situations, for example, with posts, where you have a post and you want to see a specific post. So you have an ID, a slug for that post. So in Nuxt, how you do how you solve that problem is by recurring to the underscore. So underscore ID in posts, it means a slug. It means it's a dynamic URL that you're inserting there. So in that case, it is expecting a link like base URL - post - something, which can be a number, which can be a string. It's a slug, and it's rendered through index.vue. However, in the posts, we don't want the letters to be accepted because it's an ID. So, for example, so we can use validate here. Validate, it's a function provided by Nuxt itself, which is run if you implement it, if you override it. So validate will run before the page is rendered, and the page will only be rendered if it returns true. If it returns false, then out of the box you will be thrown back to an error page, the error page that we saw the previous slide. So you just have to return false, and that's it. And this is what the data for the validate brings. So you have access to the URL params, to query params that you might send to the component, and you have access to the store that we haven't addressed yet, but we will. So let's dig deep into middleware right now. So middleware, it's code that runs before the page is rendered. As you can see by the description, middleware lets you define custom functions that can be run before rendering either a page or a group of pages. So let's give an example. This is an example of middlewares that we can run in pages before the page is rendered. We will address that inside the components by using the middleware property. In the middleware property, we can define one or more middleware. And in that, we specify the functions that we want to be run before the page is rendered. So, for example, in this case, that's how we would define the is quarantine JavaScript. So, if it's not quarantine, you will get confined. They say so. So, next step, we go to store. This is a lot weirder without seeing people.
Yeah, they are laughing. They are laughing.
But it's interesting. So now we get to the store. The store comes out of the box as well. There's two ways of implementing a store. So you have the classic mode, where you have like one index.js, where you have your actions, mutations, and getters, or you can have modules. You can have multiple JS files where you structure your code to be more readable, let's say. So you have, in the case of the module mode, you have a base store, and then you have sub-dependencies of the store. So this will help you in your project configuration. So do you know those API calls that you always have to do when you go into the site? And it's like one time you do that, and then you never do that again. So you have to decide where to put it. So Nuxt thought about it, and they provide you an action, which is Nuxt server init. So Nuxt server init, it's an action that runs only on the server side once. So it runs before everything else, and it allows you to specifically to get information that you only want to be run once. For example, in my former company, I had in my backend, I had a group of sports, and it was just the name of sports. It was 10 sports. I would always have to load. This would be the perfect place to load the sports. I would just have to do the request here, and I would dispatch that action to the store, and I will have that information available on the store across the platform. Wait, wrong keyboard. So about the module store, this is how it would be represented. So in this example, I cannot point with my fingers, but on the upper section, you have the base store, and then you have modules, and it defines one module, which is to-dos. So to-dos is like a sub-module of the main store. However, the Nuxt server init, although being very interesting, it can only be run on the base store. So if you want to run the Nuxt server init, so there's a store action that you want to run before everything else, and it's a sub-module, you will have to chain actions to access that information. So about structure, I don't know how I am with time, but I will assume I'm okay. So we're done with structure. So now what can we build? Nuxt gives us three options of development. So you can develop, actually it gives us two, but we can make it three. So it gives us like a universal app or a single page app. A single page app is nothing else than a Vue app. A universal app, however, can be a static app. So a static app, in this case, it's super interesting, and I've read some interesting opinions, which are saying that it might be the future for development. So static app, basically, Nuxt provides a command, which I believe I will show here. Nope, wait. Nuxt provides a command which is generate, that will generate every component that you have, every route that you have. It will generate it statically. So when you go into the server, the first page of every route that you can do, it's already rendered. So for SEO, this will be very good. So static app would be, for example, a very good option for an informative website, for example, or for building a portfolio where you have that information, and there's not much that you're going to have. However, the static app, after it's pre-rendered, it will convert itself, let's say, also to a single-page application. So it starts to render on the server, and then it becomes a single-page application. This is super great for SEO because remember the example I gave you in the beginning, that single-page applications, when the index HTML goes to the client, it barely has information. In the case of the static app, it has the whole information about the first page of every route you have. Compared to the universal app, one of the main differences is that the universal app will require a server with Node.JS included, and the static app will not require a host. So there's also some differences in code. There's some functionalities that you can only be used by one or another. But in a general overview for the time that we have, that's the explanation that I found the most fit. We're almost done with the presentation. This is one important thing. So async data, it's a function that Nuxt provides us inside of our pages, which will run before the page is rendered. And what is it for? Async data is nothing else than being able to do asynchronous requests before the page is rendered. And then the return of this async data will merge the content into our previously known data object from Vue. So the async data will be good, for example, when you have a situation where you render the page and then you have a spinner for something loading some information. That information in the spinner is being loaded asynchronously, obviously, and then will be shown. If you use async data, it will be rendered before being shown. So it has the advantage of the user doesn't see the spinner. If it's not a big time, not a long time to provide this response, it's a good option. But also, forgot the other one. Well, forgot the other one. So I'll keep on. Merge the results. Yeah, okay. So, and this is the general generate that I was talking about. So in the case of the static app, you can tell Nuxt to pre-render on the server every page on the platform. So in this example, there's a little trick here, which I'm going to address, and I believe it's the last slide. So in the posts example, you can have multiple posts. You don't know how many. It depends on the database, what you have on your database. So in this case, you can tell Nuxt, in this case through a for cycle, to run through all the posts that you have. But you can also, because you're using it here, and you will still have access to the post on the other side, you can actually send a payload, which is addressed there. I don't have the line, but it's addressed there. You can send a payload to the component itself. So in the component itself, you can check if there is a payload, then I'm not going to do anything. I already have the data because it's already been loaded. But if I don't have the payload, then I can actually make the request to the database to get newer posts. When does that happen? So the generate is generated on the server side, correct? So this generate will be run the first time that you actually enter the site. But then when you navigate through through your website. And when you get back to the post section, then it will be run again the code on the component, and then the payload will not be there anymore. So it is pre-rendered. So that's it. So I think the thank you didn't come out pretty well, but I thank you for your time. I hope I didn't speak too fast, but I was kind of short in time. Thank you so much for being here. I just wanna point something out. If you're interested about Nuxt and about what this provides, there's actually going to be another meetup in the 11th of May in Zurich about Nuxt with, I believe, one of the developers of Nuxt itself. So it might be an interesting thing to deepen the knowledge in it. I'm surely going to be there. And right now I'm available to try to answer any questions with the knowledge I have. So I think that's all. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Tadeu. Just clarify me one thing. That meetup in Zurich, is it also remote?
Yes, it is also remote.
Okay, great. We will share that.
Okay, good.
So, is there any questions? So we had I had one question actually, which was already answered by one of the attendees. Which is if Nuxt is planning to support Vue 3 as well. But
I haven't read any news about it, but I assume yes. Nuxt, as far as I've read, Nuxt is actually developing pretty well, and it's solving some interesting problems and making it creating some ease on working. The workflow is pretty. If Vue is easy, Nuxt is surely following the same footsteps. So I don't see many reasons for it to not continue to adapt into further developments of Vue. I don't have like an official answer to this, but if I would have to say something, yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah, and actually one of the attendees, like Rui shared a link where there is some information about Nuxt and Vue 3. Is there any questions that somebody wants to make? No? I just see congratulations for your talk, Tadeu. A lot of people saying they really enjoyed your presentation, so thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you so much as well.
If
I
there
think
is
we have a question. Yeah, from Antonio Fernandes.
Okay, there is one question.
Yeah. What kind of problem do you use Nuxt or vanilla Vue?
What kind of problems? So
what kind of problems you would use Nuxt or vanilla over Vue vanilla?
So I would say from what I've seen, you can do everything that you're doing in Nuxt. You can do in Vue. It's just making it easy. It's the same approach. Everything that you're doing in Vue, you can do in vanilla JavaScript. But there's Vue to simplify stuff. Basically, that's it. And Nuxt simplifies a lot of things. Like you don't have to work with routes. The server-side rendering, it's a lot easier. And numerous others that right now I'm not thinking of. But so it's basically about making stuff easier. So
I don't know, Antonio, if you want to pose the question in a different way. Antonio, feel free to turn on your mic. Antonio?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to pose the question to a different way for Tadeu?
I'm trying to see if Nuxt is a wrapper around Vue or something more. I never use Nuxt, so I understand what he said about wrapping up Vue in vanilla or the opposite, and now seeing another layer of abstraction. But what I was trying to figure out, it was, would you use Vue over Nuxt on any occasion, and why?
Okay. For the moment, in my experience, I haven't done any professional experience on this. But for the moment, if I have to start a project, and I will start very soon, I will start it in Nuxt. I believe from what I've seen that Nuxt is, and I have that in like one of the first slides, it's quite flexible. So even if there's something that it might not be perfect now, you can actually even do it with Vue. So for example, there's a Nuxt community with components and libraries to address numerous needs that you have. But you can also implement the basic Vue components. So there's a lot of flexibility between Nuxt and Vue. So I don't think that, from what I've seen, I don't think that Nuxt is filling any hole about Vue. So it's not that Vue cannot do it. It's just that Nuxt, some things, it's doing it better. So generally, I believe that using Nuxt would be a good approach. That's what I feel like right now. But again, I don't have enough professional experience to be able to tell you that. But this is my opinion, though, from what I've done.
Okay.
Did I make it clear in some way?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the question, though.
Yeah, we have here another question, which is there anything similar with for React?
I am not sure at all. I know. I'm not sure at all about React. I don't know. I haven't it's in my queue to learn React, but I haven't dug deep into it. Yeah.
People here are saying Next.JS. So
Next.js, that's one of the. I don't know Next.js, but I came across a lot of times with a comparison that saying that Nuxt is kind of similar to Next.js, but I'm not sure what Next.js is because I never used it. But it's similar.
Let me also give share my understanding with regarding the question of Antonio about Nuxt, if it was suitable or not. I also have some personal concerns, let's say, about having another layer of abstraction over Vue. So in smaller projects, I think it's pretty much okay, and to give fast prototyping and even smaller applications, I think it's okay. But if you're going to something more enterprise, I would consider it twice, because you're not just waiting for support on one framework, you're already waiting for support on two. And this abstraction over abstraction can cause you some problems. But still, it's a great framework, and it's suitable for many projects.
So let me just compliment on something I was saying. They actually say that even for some good size projects, it's still a good option. So according to I believe the documentation, so that should be a good option. One thing that makes me question a bit is that it forces you to a specific structure that works pretty well. I don't know for a really big size scale how well it would work. I didn't have time to experiment with a huge scale project, but they say that it's very viable and very good for big size projects as well.
Okay.
So that's it. Thank you so much for the questions. Thank you so much, Fabio. Thank you so much, Carlos. I really enjoyed this moment. I really hope I didn't speak too fast, but I surely hope that you have like a good presentation.
Thank you to Tadeu for accepting the challenge.
Thank you. So next one. Thank you, Tadeu. Next one. We will have the next talk. It's Miguel Teixeira from Pixel Matters. He's going to present. His presentation is called Vue.js: The Fast and the Furious, or the Furious, and it will be about performance. So Miguel, please feel free to start.
Yeah, sure. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes, you just have to share your presentation full screen. Yeah, perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you. So
let me just turn on the pointer. That way it will be easier to just describe what I'll be presenting on this talk. So let me just begin with a small introduction about myself. My name is Miguel Teixeira. I'm a full stack developer at Pixel Matters, and I'd like to thank Fabio for accepting my proposal to give this talk here on Porto.Vue. let me start by saying that this talk it's about, as Fabio has already mentioned, this talk is about performance. But since the topic performance is a topic that can cover a lot of things, I prepared this talk in a manner that it kind of touches a bit all over the place, but I think it includes several tips that I think that can be valuable for everyone. So with that being said, I'll start the talk. The name Vue.js, the Fast or the Furious. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the name The Fast or the Furious, the pun was intended to take from the movie The Fast and the Furious. And why did I choose the title The Fast or the Furious? The reason why I chose this title was because when addressing this topic, which is performance, it's a topic where we mostly relate to how a service, how a product impacts our experience, and that's why I called it the Fast or the Furious, because when we are browsing for a website, browsing through a mobile app, if that service, that product doesn't provide us with performance, it's not fast enough, we will immediately feel frustrated, and somehow we'll end up in a short period of time to leave that app, to leave that website. And that's one of the reasons why performance it's crucial to build any app, to build any website in these days. So it's not just a matter of just making things run smoothly. It's also a matter of giving that experience to users. So performance, I think performance, in my opinion, it's one of those cornerstones while developing any application. Along with accessibility, along with user experience, user interface, performance, and also security. Performance, I think it's one of those things that we really need to focus when we're working on an application. So why is it crucial? Sorry. The main concern while we're speaking about performance is retaining users and improving conversions. Just to give this example that I brought up, Pinterest increased search engine traffic and signups by 15% when they reduce perceived wait times by 40%. And this tells you that, in fact, performance does have impact on how you will be able to retain your users and also improve your conversions. And on the flip side, we have the BBC found they lost an additional 10% of users for every additional second their site took to load, which, like I said, performance does impact user retainability, and also it can impact the conversions that we can have on our application. For this reason, that's why performance it's not just a matter of having an application running smoothly. It will also cost you money. Especially if we're dealing with a large user base. So I brought this what is called the wetware perception reaction times, which wetware, for those of you who don't know, it's somehow how we call software and hardware, but wetware is related to the human brain or the human being and how they relate to technology. Let's put it that way, and how can then process things. And this table that I brought, on the left side, it shows how the delay will be perceived for the user. So, for instance, if we have something that occurs in a time frame of about from 0 to 100 milliseconds, sorry, it will be perceived as instant. If we have 100 to 300, it will be perceived as slightly perceptible delay. And if we go beyond that, from 300 to 1 second, more than 1 second, the user will perceive that as a task focus, perceptible delay, and ultimately as a mental context switch. And what this means is if some task takes longer than just 1 second, or even above 3 milliseconds, the user will start to lose focus on his engagement of the application, and this is when we are entering, let's put it that way, this way, a danger zone in terms of retaining that user. And if something takes more than just 1 second, it also probably means that we'll be losing that user. So this is just to give you guys an overview of how performance is really perceived by users, and why should we care in terms of the time frame on how things happen, and how that impacts users. So, and how should we prepare our application to respond to users? So I'll begin to now to deep dive into some potential bottlenecks that I've personally found while developing applications in Vue. But I just want to let everyone know that these topics are somewhat kind of general. Even though they are applied to Vue, they can also be shared across all other types of applications. But as I know that not everyone that attends this meeting, this talk, Porto.Vue, is necessarily a Vue developer, as I had the chance to witness. I think it will be extremely important to show also examples that can be brought to other JavaScript frameworks, and also applications in general. So first, I will begin with VIF and VShow, which are Vue.js directives, which simply they allow us to be able to show or display something in the browser, or just remove that from the view, to be able to toggle components. And to make things a bit clear, I'll show this example. And the thing I want to talk about in terms of performance in regards to VIF and VShow, it is, as you guys can see here, we're toggling this button, which where it does is using the VIF directive to show, in this case, to add or remove a component from the user's viewport. And as you can see, every time that we toggle the button, it will add or remove that that element from the DOM. And why is it important to? I mean, what is the difference to begin with? What is the difference between VIF and VShow? VIF and VShow, the VIF will remove or add the component, in this case the element, from the DOM when a condition turns true or false, respectively. With VShow, we will adjust the. I can show that as well in the next slide. The element will be immediately inserted on the DOM. And as soon as we place a condition true or false, it will simply toggle the style, the display. It will change the display of that element. And why should we care about the difference between VIF and VShow when it comes to performance? The reason why we should care is I brought this stats that I took from Vue, the Vue performance tools, and as you can see, we have the mount render, which has a 5 count, which was the number of times that I did this demo. It took about 250 milliseconds to do the toggle for all those 5 tentatives. And what I mean by this, the mount render was the mount render refers to the time that it takes Vue to get that element and place it on a DOM. And then we also have the mounted, the mounted, let's call it stat, which is the time it takes to set up that element on the after being set up the element on the DOM. Right now, we have the VShow example, which, as I said previously, what it does is just toggles the display of that element. And if we compare the stats with VIF, we can see that the mount render, it only took 80 or 84 milliseconds to place that element, to render that, place that element on the DOM, which is I know that these numbers may not seem like a lot, but if we are working with really complex components, I'm certain that you could probably have this problem as well. In terms of it might not be too perceptible, but it might get to this point where you will start wondering if VIF or VShow might be the best option for depending on the case that you're working on. So just to close this topic, VIF, as I said, VIF, the thing that it does is it if the condition that we are putting on the element while we're using VIF is false, that component will never be rendered to begin with on the document, on the DOM, or in this case on the page. Only when that condition turns true, only then the component will be put on the DOM. And that's why when we are toggling using VIF, it will have higher costs in terms of rendering that component. While VShow, on the other hand, since it places immediately the element on the DOM, it will have higher initial costs to place that element to begin with. But if we toggle, if we keep toggling the display, it won't have that many costs to remove completely the element and having to mount it that again. So just to conclude this, we should, that's one of the recommendations from the Vue documentation, is that we should prefer VShow if the component that will be toggled can be toggled, will be toggled very often and will probably be controlled by the user. So let's say that we have like a set of, I don't know, tabs, where the user can just go through each tab and see different content. In those cases, it's always preferred to go with VShow. In other scenarios where, for instance, we will want to insert, I don't know, maybe a model or something, that it won't appear unless like a really specific condition which it will trigger the display. In those cases where it will be very rare to have to render the component and toggle that render, it makes perfect sense to go with the VIF as Vue.js recommends. So now the bounce and throttle. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these concepts, which they also apply to applications in general. Sorry, let me just drink a bit of water because I have my mouth dry. There we go. So the bounce and throttle are just two concepts of how we can handle certain events throughout the time. And to be more explicit, sorry, I brought this example. Let's let's imagine if you're in an elevator and someone is clicking on the to open the doors, the button where we press to open the doors. We won't be able to the person that is inside the elevator won't be able to proceed. The elevator won't begin its function until someone stops pressing that button. And this is basically the concept behind debounce, which is we want to delay a function, delay something until something stops executing. Let's put it that way. Which what this means is that way we'll be able to optimize how the resources, how we'll be executing resources, for example. But I'll give you just a more clear example. I did a quick demo where we just have a search where we can search for a location, and it will give you the weather for that location. And what I did was using Vue, I placed the listener on the input that every time a user inputs a letter, it will make a request. As you can see here, it will make a request for every letter that I just entered. And this is one of the things that most of the times we are not fully aware that might happen. But as you can see, this is a potential bottleneck because if the user keeps writing, has to write a lot more, or he writes really fast, we are just unnecessarily making requests, which will eventually become a bottleneck. And that's why debounce works as a great way for us to delay that request. For instance, in this case, when the user finishes writing the whole word. So this is an example without debounce. And just to give you now a code example on how we can use debounce to avoid making all those requests. And as you can see here, we are using, I'm using in this example, the debounce function from Lodash, which is I don't know, from those of you that might not know, Lodash is a utils, let's call it that way, a utils library that does a lot of things. You should, if you don't know, you should check that out, because it can really save you a lot of time while developing. And in this case, we are using debounce, which allows us to, as you can see here on the template, we are using vModel that is using is pointing to the needle data that we have right here, that it's empty, and we have a result that begins with null. And what we're doing here is we are watching for changes on the needle property. And while we're watching changes, we want to make sure that we want to make sure that every time a new change happens, we don't want to make the request immediately. Otherwise, we'll have the effect that I've shown on the previous slide. So what we do is we wrap the bounce function around the method that will make the request, and we specify what is the time to wait for. What is the time to wait for to wait until we'll call that the inner function, which is this make request, and that is the function that will make the request. This way, what we're doing here is we're every time that there's a change to the needle, which is the search input, we'll say, hey, just wait. In this case, it's milliseconds, which means it's 1 second. So hey, wait 1 second until the user stops writing anything, and then call this function. That way, as you can see here, with the bounce, I will start writing. I'll start writing, and as you can see, it only made one request because it's waiting for me to stop writing, and then counts the 1 second. And as soon as that 1 second ends, it will call that function. And this way, we can avoid that bottleneck of having multiple requests while we should just make one. And I think this is really, it might look like something small, but when we have, well, let's say that if we were making like a really heavy request with a lot of data, this would probably be a great way to solve that kind of bottleneck. Now, moving to Throttle. Throttle is a bit different from debounce, and I was not entirely sure how I could have brought the best example to show, but I'll try to do my best with this one, which is, let's imagine in a scenario where we have, like, for instance, this subway where passengers will wait for the doors to open so they can enter. Throttle. The concept behind Throttle is to not having to wait till the end as debounce does, but is allow something to for some periods of time. And let me just read the example to make it even more clear, which is, throughout their journey, subways will open their doors at each stop for a short period of time. They limit the amount of people that can enter during those period stops in order to optimize their resources. I'm sorry for having to read this, but it will make it more simple for you guys to understand. So basically, what Throttle, the concept behind Throttle is if a subway needs to make those stops, it will only make those stops for a short period of time, and in that short period of time, we will allow passengers to enter in the subway, and this is what I get that this might not be the best example, but this was something that I think it resonates more with how we apply Throttle on development. So let me just show also an example, which I think it becomes more clear. So let's imagine that we have a list where we basically we scroll through that list. And we want to make sure that if we get to the end of the list, we want to make a request for more content, to have what is called an infinite scroll. So when as you can see, I'm on the console, I'm throwing out, I'm outputting what is, every time that a user uses a scroll, the number of times that an event is called. And as you can see, when we scroll, it gets output a lot of times. And the reason why we need to use Throttle in a situation like this is because it allows us to when the user begins to scroll, we won't be calling every time that this gets triggered, we won't be calling more and more requests. We will only make that request only between small periods of time. Let's say that you scroll for 1 second. So we want to make sure that in that one second, we only call the request more content for 200 milliseconds. That way, we'll be able to control how many times, by using the scroll, the user will be able to request for more content. As you can see here, I have also this example where we add this event listener for scroll, and we also make the requests. I'm also using Lodash, the Throttle method from Lodash, which is basically almost the same example as I've shown before. This time, what we're doing here is, instead of wrapping with debounce, we wrap with Throttle, and we say if a user scrolls, keep scrolling, we will only call the performs request code in intervals of 1 second. So if the user scrolls continuously for 10 seconds, and for 10 seconds, the number of times that the make request function will be called is 10 times. If we didn't use Throttle, and if we scroll for 10 seconds, it would probably be called, I don't know, maybe 100 times, I don't know. So this is the main reason, this is the main use case for using Throttle. When we have an event that occurs, that fires for a great amount, for a great number, and we need to control the amount of times that we will want to respond to that trigger. And as you can see here, if we use throttle, and as you can see here, I'm doing a continuous scroll, and the number of times that the check if need more content will be output, it's way less that as I shown before. And this is why we should opt in this particular case, we should opt to use throttle to make sure that if the user starts scrolling like a madman, as you can see here, we won't be making requests, a lot of requests unnecessarily. So this is one of the main uses for throttle, and I totally recommend using, as it's a great way to avoid what I believe is a common bottleneck. Next, we have object freeze and virtual lists. Why I'm bringing this up about object freeze and virtual lists is, before deep diving into what is here in the code, there are a lot of times where we need to output a lot of data to a user in the browser. Let's say that we have, like, I don't know, maybe a table of contents, and let's say that we are fetching, I don't know, 2,000, 5,000 rows. What normally happens when we have that huge amount of data to show to the user is by using Vue to fetch that data and assigning that data to the data method, we're saying to Vue, hey Vue, take a look at my data and keep an eye on it. And that has a great cost when we render that list, in this case, using Vue, which is, as you can see here, I made this is an example that I took, which is a simple component list with 2,000 entries. And as you can see here, the created hook from Vue, it won't take that much, but what we should care about is the mount render, which is the time that it took to render 2,000 entries. And as a component grows in complexity and as the number of entries grow, it will also exponentially grow the amount rendered, which can be easily perceptible by users. And this is where things like object freeze can come handy. So if you, in this case, using the exact same example that I shown, if we fetch a huge list, in this case, a huge list of users, what we need to do to tell Vue, hey Vue, don't care, you don't need to make this data reactive. We will use only this data to show to users. So one of the solutions that we might use is object freeze, which basically locks this is a method from ES6, if I'm not mistaken, which I don't know, the best way to put it is it blocks any changes to an object. So basically, it's a sort of like a freeze. So Vue won't be able to make any changes on that object, and therefore it is way more lightweight to render. And as you can see here, it took about half of what was taking to render that component. There might not be that many cases where you have like a huge list, but it will certainly make a difference when that is the case. Also, we have something that I've personally used, which is virtual lists. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but virtual lists, what they basically are is, if you consider the concept that I just spoke about of having a huge list, what will happen if you have a huge list with a lot of components is when you scroll through that list, you could probably have you will probably feel a bit of lag, let's put it that way, because it will consume more memory on the browser to render that list, and also for Vue to keep track of all elements on that list. And using virtual lists might be extremely helpful to improve this issue. To improve the performance when having this issue. So just by looking at the image, I think it seems pretty simple, which is, instead of the concept is, instead of showing all the elements on the DOM, of putting all elements on the DOM, what we do is we use a virtual list where we basically will be inserting on the DOM only the elements that will be usable. That will be shown or are visible on the user's viewport. And what this means is, if I enter a page and I have a viewport of, I don't know, maybe like 800 pixels of height, if I'm showing a list, I could probably cut. In this case, I'll be only showing the first items, and I won't be needing to render all the elements on the list without the user before the user starts doing the scroll, which it really is a bump in terms of performance. I can show you a quick example, which is, as you can see here, if we scroll through the list and we have this viewport, as you can see here, the number of elements stays the same. We specify that in a specific viewport we will want X number of elements to be shown to that user, and when the user starts doing the scroll, the virtual list will take care of updating the elements on that view for the user to see the data. Which, of course, like I said, if we have really complex components with a lot of reactivity, with event listeners, this will make a ton of a difference. And this is what was the case when I needed to use virtual lists. Just to give you an overview on how much a virtual list can really save the performance when dealing with this type of lists. As you can see here, for the build amount, if we don't use a virtual list, and we have, like, I don't know, I know this is an absurd number, but if we have like 100,000 entries, it could probably crash the browser. And this is something, of course, that the user would I don't know, maybe go nuts if something like that could happen. But as you can see here, also I have left a link down below, which is a plugin made for Vue, which is Vue Virtual Scroll List. That was the one that I used. And as you can see here on the performance comparison, by using, it has two modes, item mode and V4 mode. It doesn't really have that much difference. It will be just how you would like to render that list. You guys can check the documentation of Vue Virtual Scroll List to know more about that. But what I'm trying to get from this table is, as you can see, just by as the number of items on the list increases, the performance gains that one could have just by using a virtual list are pretty easy and pretty simple to see. And as you can see, the amount of memory that we'll need to use only by having a virtual list that shows a limited set of items it will stay low, and in contrary to not using a virtual list. And that's one of the main benefits of using a virtual list. Moving forward, about this topic, client-side storage, I have I haven't got a deep example to show you guys, but and I believe that the vast majority of you guys are familiar with local storage. But I just wanted to brought this example nonetheless to showcase that there may be some scenarios where let's say that a user has a really large form, and instead of if he refreshes the page, we want to persist that information on the page. As you can see, I will refresh the page, and it will persist the data. And why does this has to do with performance? Instead, let's put it this way. Instead of having to submit the data back to the API so that we can record the data that the user was inserting, we can simply just cut that middleman and just use local storage for this purpose. I know that there are way more purposes to local storage, but I think this is one of those examples that makes perfect sense, and that it can also has in terms of the user perceiving the performance of how the app reacts to changes. I think it really makes a difference. So I'll try to be a bit more fast, because I believe I'm taking a lot of time now. So just a few tips to keeping things light in terms of when we are working on a Vue.js application or any JavaScript application. On these days, we tend to use a module bundle. And what this means is that sometimes we start with our main.js file, and that main.js file requires another module, and it requires another one, and most of the times we don't have full visibility to what are the peer dependencies of those modules. As you can see here, module A, it will depend on module B. Module A also depends on module G, and we get to a point that when Webpack does the bundling of our dependencies of our application, we get the final bundled JavaScript. And something to consider in terms of performance is ensuring that our bundle will stay as lightweight as possible. Otherwise, it will take a lot of time for the user to load that file on the browser. And one of the topics that I wanted to bring into this talk was code splitting and lazy loading. What code splitting and lazy loading are? I'll start with code splitting, which is with code splitting, when we, for instance, on our application, when we do a simple import, or in this case, it's called static import. When we bundle our application, this file, it will end up in the bundle. And what this means is, let's say that this file, it won't appear on the home page, and when we import this file this way. Since this will end up on the bundle, if a user enters on the home page, he will also need to load this file without probably never having to see the component. And this is one of those bottlenecks that can be addressed by using code splitting. And as you can see below, one of the ways to make sure that a file that won't necessarily be immediately needed for a user is using the dynamic imports. And as you can see here, by using an arrow function and doing the import this way, only when the component will be mounted, or in this case, used by Vue, it's only then that the browser will make a request to fetch that in this case, that chunk to get the component. Otherwise, it will end up on the bundle, as I said. And we can also, besides components, we can also segment how, if you are using the Vue router, we can also segment what components will be loaded on a specific route, which can be really useful. Like I mentioned in the homepage example, let's say that if we get to the homepage, we won't be loading the component full unless we enter this path, which is a great advantage to reduce the final bundle or the initial bundle that we'll be presenting to users. As for lazy loading, it's kind of similar to code splitting, but in this case, what we do is we're also dynamically importing that lazy model, and we are placing it on the template. But when we render this template on the browser, in this case, what Vue will do is, as you can see here, we have a boolean which tells us if the model is visible, and if the model visible begins as false, this component will only be loaded when this boolean turns true, which is really useful. Because in this example, if the model won't be immediately visible to the user, it doesn't make sense to load it immediately on the bundle. Now, moving on to Chrome DevTools coverage, this is also something that it's really useful to cover what I was just speaking earlier about lazy loading and code splitting. If you want to make sure that your bundle isn't using unnecessary data, in this case unnecessary bytes, if you use in this case if you use Chrome DevTools using the coverage, you can see that it shows you the files and the amount of bytes that it's not using for that file, which is a great indicator that you probably will need to use either code splitting or lazy loading or both. And I just wanted to give this quick tip for you guys to be able to do that kind of debug when you're trying to figure out why is your bundle size so high. Now, this is just a simple suggestion that I found, which is a package that basically allows you to gives you an overview of what are the peer dependencies being used on your bundle, which is I'm leaving the link down below, which is a Webpack bundle analyzer, which basically I think it's also gives you a great overview of how is your bundle being composed of, and of course, as you can see here, the amount of boxes, the larger the box is, the larger the weight of that dependency is. And in this case, as you can see, Lodash is one of the largest dependencies in terms of size that this bundle has. So I think it's also this tool is also a convenient way to always be knowing when your bundle is growing unnecessarily on size. I've also found another package which I think is really interesting, which is bundle size. Bundle size is something that we can use as on a continuous integration process, which allows you to monitor also the size of your final bundle. You can set the max size that you think that is the limit for your bundle. And as you can see here, you can integrate it into things like GitHub, so that every time that, for instance, you make a pull request, you'll be aware that the bundle size is below or higher than the margin that you can set. Now, to just this is the final point, just to close out the presentation. I'd just like to mention the Vue DevTools, the performance tab that you can see here. If you are using the Vue DevTools, you can access here the performance tab. And what this gives you is you can basically record how your application is doing in terms of performance, how much it takes to render the components, and you can also as you can see here, it shows you by order what are the components that are taking way longer to render. And on the components rendered tab, you can see basically the amount of frames per second for each, as you can see here, mutations. You basically get a really deep insight throughout the loading of your application, what is happening and what is taking longer to render and to mount. And I think it's one of those tools that are absolutely essential to track and monitor the performance of a Vue application. And that's all, guys. Thanks.
Okay, Miguel, thank you very much for
that was a lot of I'm sorry for dragging this presentation a bit long, but I hope that it was useful.
It's okay. Really good tips. Thank you very much. Some very, very useful tips. I don't know if there is some questions here. I actually have one that I made. So we actually, at InfraSpeak, we actually use a lot of virtual scroller because we have a huge amount of lists with a lot of data. And my question is, do you know any issues with using virtual scroller? It's undoubtedly a good plugin for performance improvements. We have huge performance improvements, but there is some drawbacks as well. Do you know some?
You said virtual scroller. I don't know if you're
virtual scroller. Sorry.
Virtual list or
virtual list. Sorry. So yes, virtual.
Oh
list.
Yeah. From my experience, what I've noticed, I guess the major problem that I noticed with virtual lists is that in a scenario where a user aggressively does a scroll, I think that the way that virtual list handles that, what I mean by this is if the user scrolls too fast to the bottom of the list and tries to see basically what the virtual list will do is immediately try to re-render those final items. And I think that while handling those final items, while the user does a scroll with some speed, I think that virtual list doesn't actually handle that it doesn't handle too well if a user tries to scroll to the end of the list too fast. I think that was one of the main concerns that I found while using virtual list.
Okay. Yeah, you should also be. I wouldn't say extra careful. There is a documentation on that, but if the size of the items, the vertical size of each item varies, you have to do some additional work. It's not a direct implementation, but it works. It works well.
Okay. Yeah.
So any more questions here? No.
I think it's a wrap up.
Guess not. I'll share the presentations later, so feel free to go on Slack if you have some questions afterwards, okay?
And yes, and to finish, we would like to take a picture with everybody with the camera on, if possible. So if please, can you turn your cameras on?
Turn on your cameras. Hi, everyone.
We have people in the car.
Hello, guys.
That's
okay,
awesome.
great. So let's take a picture then.
Yeah. Can you count to 3?
1, 2, 3.
4.
You win. Okay, thank you all, guys. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
If you want to stay in the end and have a talk, just keep on this chat.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Obrigado.
Obrigado nós.
Thank you.
Tchau.
Hugs from Aveiro.
Obrigado. Abraço do Porto também.
Gosto muito da malta do Porto. Já morei aí.
Já?
Já.
Deixaste render aos encantos de Aveiro agora.
Foi. Fiz um
Foram
filho
jogos
aqui.
moles. Foram jogos moles.
Não, fiz um filho aqui e vim para cá.
Faz parte.
4 anos já.
Também não estás longe do Porto, podes sempre cá vir dar um pulinho.
É, sim. Quem sabe um dia volto para aí.
É isso.
É isso. Depois do Covid.
Obrigado, pessoal.
Nada, nada.
Abraço.
Tchau.
Carlos, podes ligar a apresentação? Estamos a
Já
ver
te
todos.
liguei? Ok.
Eras tu ou é... Ah, não, é o Miguel. É o Miguel que tem a apresentação ligada.
É.
Top screen. Ok.
Fixe.
Correu bem? Acho que sim.
Oi, Joel, estás aí?
Quem é o Joel?
O Joel. Piccoli. Já conheço aqui há algum tempo também. Malta conhecida. Pessoal das últimas meetups. Algumas maltas novas. Fixe. Só
Bom,
falta
Miguel.
agora é espaço para ver uma mini todos juntos, não é?
Como é que é? Para ir para a notada?
Para nortada agora?
Vais para a notada agora?
Olha,
Não, agora
a nortada agora ia bem.
por
Até
acaso
duas. Até duas.
já tenho umas saudades, por acaso. Já...
Impecável, pessoal, impecável, foi fixe.
Sim, pá, realmente tem sido um bocado estranho às vezes, pá, um gajo estar a falar e não ter contacto visual, mas acho que correu bem. O facto de o pessoal também ter as câmaras ligadas ajuda, de certa maneira, a ter a qualidade de streaming e de som que era desejável. E acho que no final acabou por correr bastante bem, as talks foram boas e acho que o pessoal gostou.
Eu acho que por acaso acho que correu bem. Claro que perdes um bocadinho a dinâmica de interagir um bocadinho com o público, não é? Mas de resto acho que.
Sim,
acho que foi.
as jokes que estão nas apresentações, que são boas, tu não consegues, ficas ali naquela cena do será que funcionou, será que não funcionou?
Yeah. Opa, eu fiquei naquele olho que se lixe. Mas é diferente, não é? Se o pessoal está à frente e se ri, tu ficas com aquela, ok, está a correr bem a apresentação.
É um pouco isso. E o Miguel acabou também por meter lá uns gifs muito bons. Grandes analogias, Miguel. Grandes analogias mesmo.
Obrigado, Tiago. Fábio.
É pá, não me confundas, pá. Eu não estou aí, pá. Mas olha, acho que pá, estão de parabéns, correu mesmo super bem. Reparei que tivemos pá, 10, 4 pessoas de Espanha, pessoal brasileiro também. Acho que também temos aí uma pessoa de Londres, que eu penso que é o Rui. E não sei se não teve também aí alguém de Zurique, o que é que foi. Por isso até pá, estamos aí a internacionalizarmos. Pá, o próximo passo é uma ViewConf. Um dia dele.
Oh, pai, por acaso não sei se sabes, mas acho que era tipo, estavam a tentar, eu vi, não sei nem, agora não consigo dizer exatamente, mas basicamente acho que estavam tipo a juntar várias conferências de Vue da Europa, tipo numa.
Fizeram isso do mundo. Eu tenho aqui o link, se quiserem eu mando.
Pois é isso.
Já houve que foi o Vue World Event, alguém partilhou connosco, acho que foi ele, foi o Tadeu, sim.
Pois é.
Por acaso eu vi que aquilo foi 3 horas e eu pensei, eu vou ver, mas depois, não sei, ainda não arranjei 3 horas seguidas para me sentar a ver aquilo.
Sim, já houve aí uma approach ou outra para a gente avançar, se calhar, para uma coisa do género. Pá, por enquanto ainda vamos tentar estabilizar aí a comunidade e garantir consistência.
Estava a dizer na apresentação, acho que disse isso. Uma das pessoas que vai apresentar, a primeira parte da pessoa que vai apresentar em Zurique é mesmo uma das pessoas que trabalhou no Nuxt, pelos vistos. Não sei se é founder. Deixa eu ver.
É possível, é?
É da equipa de Nuxt. Por isso, pronto, é de Nuxt, né? Mas é interessante.
Sim.
Viu-se a minha tia a entrar, eu não percebi se dava para ver ou não.
Eu não vi ninguém, por acaso.
Vá lá. Aquela coisa de fazer apresentações remote ou reuniões remote e de vez em quando aparece uma pessoa inesperada.
A única coisa que eu notei foi o Miguel a pegar na vodka e depois a dizer que era água. Foi a única coisa. Ele a tomar ali o calmante,
Não enganou muitas pessoas, não enganou muitas pessoas. Bem, pessoal, olha, obrigado, bom trabalho e vamos falando. Tadeu, depois não esqueças de mandar a apresentação, está bem, para eu partilhar com ele.
Já te mando.
Obrigado.
Manda o link, pode ser?
Como quiseres. Um abraço.
Pronto, é isso. Abraço, obrigado e olha, vemo-nos para a próxima, está bem? E olha, bom jantar a todos e bom feriado amanhã.
Igualmente.